Okay, so I wanted to give you guys a run through about how we deploy EOS with Ansible. Firstly, thanks to EOSeoul for inviting us. It's great to be here and have a run through this. So before I dig in, myself, my name's Pete. I'm the founder of BlockMatrix. We're a block producer based in the UK. A lot of the heritage from myself and the team has actually been in online advertising in the past. So we've been very used to building out highly available scalable infrastructure, an infrastructure that has to be on 24/7 and used to, processing a lot of concurrent events. And throughout those years, we used many tools, and Ansible for us was one that we adopted early, and we still used it years later. So it was a natural choice for when we were going to build out our infrastructure for EOS. So why Ansible, and what is it? In a nutshell, Ansible automates software provisioning, it automates configuration management, and it also allows you to automate application development. So 3 pretty strong cases for why you should use it. For us, really there's 3 main points. Humans make mistakes, right? We're very, very unreliable. Imagine that you have a sysadmin team and you are installing software by SSHing onto a production box. You're apt-get installing packages and you're manually configuring them with Nano, right? That's a pretty scary concept, and it's one that doesn't scale very well. We're also terrible at documentation. So whether that's within software development right through to an ops team, documentation, especially for, say, new starters or people trying to understand what a bit of code is doing, is generally pretty difficult. So Ansible, by the way that it's written, almost self-documents, and we'll come back to that. And the third is we need to scale fast. We have no idea how the EOS network will scale in terms of the demands on the block producers and on our infrastructure. It's not as simple as a masternode where you can just run this on a $5 VPS server and forget about it. This is a real infrastructure that has to have N+1 redundancy. It needs to be distributed geographically. We need to be able to scale fast, and in order to do that, you need to cut out as much human intervention as possible. So what is configuration management? Well, within the Ansible realm, it's an open source project. You can just go and download it and get cracking straight away. For us, what was very important for a tool like this that is communicating with servers is that there are minimal dependencies. So actually the only dependency required on your destination servers is Python. So that's it. There is no need for Ansible software to be installed on those servers. It purely communicates over SSH from a host machine. So it's using open standards. There's no proprietary Ansible specific programming language to learn or anything like that. So there's a very low barrier to entry. And as I said, no agents. So literally nothing has to run as a daemon within a server. You just run everything from a host machine. And a host machine could be a Mac, or it could be a specific deployment server that you set up. There's 2 file types that exist within Ansible. The first is YAML. So YAML is human readable, but also crucially, it can be parsed and read by machines. It's executed from top down. So it's a sequential order of tasks to run per YAML file. And being YAML, it has a concept of variables. So we can actually see this in this example here. There are some hot swap variables that at runtime, it will pick up whatever the relevant value is there and substitute that in. And then we have arrays. So here you can see with items, there's an array of effectively the binaries, and that's being passed into the hot swap command above. So programmatic concepts exist within Ansible and can be expressed in a nice way through YAML. The second file type is Ginger templates. So these are typically used for configuration files, although they can be used for other things. So in the example we have here, this is an excerpt from a config.ini for the EOS application. But this could be anything from a load balancer config, your Nginx conf for a website. It really doesn't matter. But again, crucially, these aren't just static text files. Again, we have more programmatic concepts here. So we can have conditionals and we can have loops. So in the case of loops, we can see for this example, we are effectively looping a bunch of P2P peer addresses in order to create the configuration for our EOS software to basically tell that node EOS who to connect to. So the combination of the two is actually very powerful, and it's very easy to get stuck in and start writing these files. So that low barrier to entry is great. So how does this all look conceptually? Well, within Ansible, you have effectively what's called an inventory. So this allows you to define individual servers via IP and also group them too. So it's very simple to have a collection of servers that might represent development, staging or pre-production, and then also production. So within the Ansible commands, you can call these out. You don't have to roll to every server that's within that inventory. You can limit it down to an individual machine if you want to. Ansible has this concept of playbooks. So where we saw that YAML file before, you would kind of use playbooks to perform different roles throughout your configuration management. So a role for EOS may be deploy the EOS software, and it would go through a sequential list of steps that would check out the EOS community repo. It would build the project files, and then it would deploy them to the relevant locations. Other playbook methods that we use would be deploying actual production servers. So in EOS, you have a concept of a full node, which basically responds to the RPC API requests from users of the chain and DApp developers who are calling this to get information about the chain to represent within their app, through to an actual producing node, which Jay touched on earlier, where the sole purpose of that machine is to sign and generate blocks. So all of this is managed from a management node, and again, that literally can just be on your MacBook, and as long as you have a SSH credentials to access the servers, then you can deploy from that machine. So it literally is simply using SSH to basically tunnel various commands that it will execute on the host machines. So, what can we use it for? Well, really, you can use Ansible for anything. I mean, any command that you can run on a server can be represented within Ansible. It may not have modules specifically for all apps and all programs that you can run on a server, but you can actually execute shell commands and express that through the YAML files. So there really is no limit to what you can do. So in terms of how we use this at BlockMatrix, we use this for the 3 different types of node that we run to support the EOS network. We also use it for deploying monitoring. So we use Grafana to get system level stats from all of our production machines. We use the EFK stack, so Elasticsearch, FluentD, and Kibana for log aggregation. So each individual node will log locally, and then this is exported to a centralized log server where we can do all sorts of querying on that data. And then we use Zabbix for alerting. So it really doesn't matter what the service is, it can be expressed through Ansible, and even things like security and failover. So we have all of our IP table rules documented within Ansible. In terms of the trusted mesh of peers who we connect to, we do that through WireGuard. Again, we can express the WireGuard configurations through our stack, and we use KeepAliveD for automated failover. So I'm going to just jump out and just show you a very quick demo of how this actually works. Okay, so this is basically the syntax for running a playbook. We're essentially asking Ansible, I want you to run the testnet playbook, and I want you to restrict it to this single host. In this case, what we're going to do is update the configuration for a box that we have in the jungle testnet. And you can actually tag up commands within the YAML file so that you don't have to run everything that's defined in a playbook. So in this case, we've made some configuration changes. We may have changed the peers that we're connecting to, and we might have tweaked some of the settings for NodeOS. So we simply hit enter, and it will run through sequentially everything that matches the config tag. So it's fetched the IP address of the relevant box. It's doing some checks on the public and private key that we have within our configuration file. Then it's actually updating that configuration file. And also within our test runner, we make sure we have the most up-to-date version of the Genesis file. And then we set permissions because we don't want to run this application as root. We have a specific EOS user for that. And that's essentially it. So everything can be done by the command line. Ansible do have a graphical interface called Tower, but only true techies use the command line, so we try and keep it within the terminal. Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I think it was just a great topic to talk about in the first session, because Ansible is something that we thought would be very useful. But I think it's great that you are doing